The fence had been repaired twice that summer. First after a storm snapped two cedar posts clean at the base, and then again after something heavier than weather leaned against it, long enough to split the cross rails. Out on the south pasture of the Texas property, the wire hung slightly lower than it should have, sagging just enough to show pressure over time. Caleb Turner had noticed it that morning but postponed fixing it until after dinner. There were always small repairs on a working farm. Most of them waited. By nightfall, the sky had flattened into a dark blue sheet over open land, wind moving in slow currents through dry grass. The Turner family, Caleb, his wife Marissa, and their 17-year-old son Luke, were finishing late chores when they heard the first crash. Not thunder, not machinery. Wood, breaking under force. Caleb froze, head turning toward the south pasture. Then came the second impact, louder, followed by the metallic snap of stretched wire giving way. Luke ran toward the barn entrance and switched on the floodlights. The beams swept across the pasture and caught movement near the broken section. A massive shape stood half inside, half outside the property line. Broad shoulders, heavy neck, dark hide matted with dust. The bull had been feral for months, wandering between unfenced grazing land and abandoned acreage. No owner had claimed him. No tag marked his ear. He had gored a ranch hand on a neighboring property in early spring, crushing ribs before vanishing into scrub. Since then, stories traveled faster than fences could hold. He was unpredictable, aggressive, territorial without herd structure to anchor behavior. The floodlights illuminated his face fully. One horn slightly chipped at the tip, eyes reflecting white in the glare. He did not retreat from the sudden light. He lowered his head slowly instead. Caleb stepped forward instinctively, raising his arms and shouting to drive the animal off. Most cattle respond to dominant noise and forward posture. This one did not. He took one step deeper into the pasture, nostrils flaring, hooves digging into dirt with deliberate weight. Marissa grabbed Caleb's sleeve. "Inside," she hissed. But the house sat across the open yard 50 yards away, beyond the barn. The bull now stood between them and the porch steps. The gate near the barn had not been latched fully after feed delivery earlier in the day. That oversight had created a corridor. The bull swung his head once, scanning the lit yard. He did not charge immediately. He assessed. Feral bulls, separated from herd hierarchy, often shift into solitary dominance patterns, responding to movement as challenge. Caleb backed slowly toward the barn entrance, keeping his eyes on the animal. Luke reached for the ATV parked just inside the doorway. Noise might push him back. Luke turned the ignition. The engine roared alive, echoing sharply across open yard. For a split second, the bull flinched. Then he pawed the ground and lunged forward. The charge was faster than expected, hooves tearing up dirt as the animal closed distance with shocking acceleration. Caleb shoved Luke aside and dove behind a stack of hay bales, just as the bull slammed into the front corner of the barn. The impact shook the structure, sending dust and loose nails raining from beams. The ATV stalled in panic as Luke scrambled backward. The bull turned sharply, breathing heavy clouds into cool night air, and fixed on the movement near the doorway. He was not bluffing. He had already killed once. And in the open yard under hard floodlight glare, the Turner family now stood cut off from their own house by 1,500 pounds of muscle that did not recognize boundaries anymore. The bull stood broadside in the floodlights, chest heaving, head slightly lowered, but not fully committed to another charge yet. Dust hung in the air from the impact with the barn wall, drifting through white beams like smoke. Caleb kept one hand pressed against the hay bales, forcing himself to breathe evenly. Panic triggers prey movement. Prey movement triggers pursuit. Luke scrambled to restart the ATV, fingers shaking so badly he fumbled the ignition twice before the engine coughed weakly and died again. The noise had not scared the animal off. It had focused him. Feral bulls without herd hierarchy do not respond to the same cues as managed cattle. They read motion as provocation, proximity as dominance contest. The bull took 2 heavy steps forward toward the barn opening, hooves cracking against the concrete threshold. Marissa, still inside the tack room near the side wall, realized the house was unreachable across open yard. The only viable shelter was the loft above the barn floor, accessible by a narrow wooden ladder near the grain bins. "Up," she whispered sharply. Caleb understood immediately. Vertical space buys seconds. Seconds mean options. Luke abandoned the ATV and sprinted toward the ladder. That sprint nearly cost him. The bull reacted instantly, muscles bunching, as he launched forward again. The distance from yard to doorway disappeared in less than 3 strides. Caleb grabbed a metal shovel leaning against the wall and struck the side panel of a feed barrel as hard as he could. The clang exploded inside the barn like gunfire. The bull's head snapped toward the sound mid-charge, altering trajectory just enough to slam into the barrel instead of Luke's back. Grain exploded across the floor in a shower of corn and dust. Luke reached the ladder and climbed 3 rungs at a time. Marissa followed, boots slipping on the wooden rails as she hauled herself upward. Caleb waited half a heartbeat longer to ensure they cleared the loft edge before retreating himself. The bull spun violently in the center of the barn, hooves sliding across spilled grain. His breathing had shifted from exploratory to aggressive rhythm. Short, forceful bursts through flared nostrils. He drove one horn into a support post and wrenched sideways, testing resistance. The wood groaned, but held. Caleb climbed the ladder just as the bull lowered his head and rammed the base of it. The ladder jerked hard enough to rattle the loft platform above. Luke grabbed his father's jacket and pulled him the final 2 rungs upward as the bull struck again. The second impact cracked the lower rung clean off. Now the ladder hung damaged, barely stable. The loft gave them elevation, but not full safety. The railing was waist-high, built for hay storage, not impact defense. The bull paced below, hooves crunching through grain, scanning upward. He was not confused. He tracked movement above him carefully. His eyes followed Luke as he shifted position near the loft edge. Caleb realized something cold in that moment. The animal was not acting blindly. He was isolating, preventing descent, holding ground. The barn doors remained open behind him, leading back into dark yard. But the house lights glowed in the distance beyond his broad frame. 50 yards of open exposure lay between barn and porch, and the bull stood exactly in the center of that corridor. He lowered his head once more and rammed a vertical support beam beneath the loft. The entire structure shuddered violently, hay dust raining down around them. Luke stumbled backward, nearly losing balance. "He'll bring it down," Marissa whispered. Caleb scanned the loft quickly for anything heavier than noise. There were feed sacks, coiled rope, old fencing wire. Nothing designed to stop 1,500 pounds of muscle with momentum. The bull backed up again, pawed the ground once, and charged the beam a second time. The crack was louder now. Wood fibers splintered along the joint. This was no bluff. Without herd boundaries, without handlers, without fences holding consistent line, the animal had learned that obstacles break. And tonight, every barrier between him and open dominance was being tested in sequence. The family crouched low as the barn shook again. Below them, the bull exhaled in thick white bursts and began backing up for another impact. The loft bought time, but time was thinning fast. The third impact split the support beam halfway through. The sound was sharp and fibrous, like bone under pressure. The loft dropped a fraction of an inch on one side, tilting just enough for loose hay to slide toward the railing. Marissa grabbed Luke's arm to steady him as dust filled the air in choking clouds. Below them, the bull stepped back slowly, assessing the damage. He was not charging blindly now. He was measuring structural weakness. Caleb scanned the far side of the loft and spotted a secondary exit hatch used during hay deliveries, a narrow sliding panel that opened onto the rear roof slope of the barn. It wasn't ideal. The metal roofing angled steeply downward toward the back pasture, but it led away from the front yard corridor where the bull held ground. "We move across the roof," Caleb whispered. The alternative was waiting for the beam to fail completely. The bull backed up again. His hooves dug deep into the grain-covered floor, muscles tightening across his shoulders like coiled cable. The charge hit harder than the others. The cracked beam finally gave with a splintering snap, one side of the loft dropping nearly 6 inches. Luke lost his footing entirely and slammed into the railing, which groaned under sudden weight. The bull's horn punched through a lower plank beneath them, splitting wood upward in jagged shards. He was breaking through layer by layer. Caleb didn't wait for a fourth strike. He slid open the hatch and shoved it outward into the cold night air. Wind hit their faces instantly. "Go," he said. Luke crawled through first, boots scraping metal as he climbed onto the sloped roof. Marissa followed, hands shaking but steady enough to keep balance. Caleb stepped out last and pulled the hatch partially closed behind him, though he knew it wouldn't hold against a direct hit. The bull roared below, a deep, guttural bellow that vibrated through the barn frame. He rammed again, but now the weakened loft partially collapsed inward, dumping hay and splintered wood onto the floor. The distraction slowed him for seconds. On the roof, the angle felt steeper than expected. The metal was slick with condensation and dust. One wrong step would send someone sliding off the rear edge. The house lay beyond the side yard, reachable only by crossing the ridgeline and descending near the tool shed. The bull crashed into the barn doors below, forcing one hinge loose. He emerged seconds later into open yard, head high, scanning. Floodlights still burned bright. His eyes caught movement along the roofline. He pivoted immediately. Without hesitation, he circled the barn, tracking their position from below. Feral bulls adapt quickly to vertical movement, if sight remains clear. He was not confused by elevation. He simply recalculated approach. The family edged along the roof ridge, knees bent for balance. The metal flexed under their weight with hollow echoes. Below them, the bull slammed into the barn's outer wall directly beneath Luke's position. The impact rattled the roof sheets violently, nearly knocking Luke off balance. Caleb grabbed his jacket just in time. The The bull stepped back and repeated the impact, attempting to destabilize structure from below rather than pursue upward. Obstacles break. That had been his lesson all season. Another crash shook the roof. A sheet of metal tore partially free along one seam and lifted in the wind. The house was still 30 yards away. The only safe descent point was near the shed roof extension that connected partially to the barn's side overhang. It was a jump, but manageable if timed. The bull repositioned again, this time lowering his head and charging the barn corner support post at full speed. The entire corner frame jolted. A crack ran along the exterior paneling beneath the roof edge. If that support failed, part of the roof would collapse inward. Caleb saw it clearly now. They could not outweight him. They had to cross. "Now," he said. Luke moved first, scrambling across the ridge and leaping toward the shed overhang. He landed hard, but stable, sliding on dust before catching the gutter rail. Marissa followed, breath sharp, as she cleared the gap by inches. Caleb went last. As he launched, the bull struck the corner post again. The shock traveled through the frame mid-air. Caleb landed awkwardly, but rolled onto the shed roof instead of sliding off. Below, the barn corner gave partially, wood splintering outward. The bull stepped back, breathing heavy, watching the shifting structure. The family slid down the shed roof one by one and dropped into the narrow alley between shed and house. The house door stood 10 yards ahead. Open yard remained between them and safety. The bull turned slowly from the damaged barn and faced the alley. His breathing steadied. He had tracked them across elevation. He understood the new corridor. And the open stretch ahead offered him one final line to break. The alley between the shed and the house felt narrower than it had ever been. 10 yards of packed dirt leading straight to the back porch steps. The bull stood at the mouth of that corridor, chest rising and falling in heavy rhythm, dust clinging to his dark hide. One horn was streaked with splintered wood from the barn beam. His eyes did not dart wildly. They fixed, calculated, tracked. He had followed every movement so far, loft, roof, shed. Now there was only open ground left between predator and shelter. Caleb felt the geometry of it instantly. No hay bales, no vertical ladder, no elevation advantage, just a straight line. Marissa fumbled with the house keys, hands shaking too hard to get the right one ready. Luke grabbed a metal trash can lid leaning against the shed wall and held it instinctively, like a shield. It would not stop 1,500 pounds of muscle. It might buy half a second. The bull lowered his head slightly, testing the dirt with one forehoof. He was not bluffing. He was compressing distance in his mind before committing. Caleb scanned once more for anything that changed the equation and saw it. The old livestock trailer parked crooked near the side yard, its ramp still half lowered from last week's feed delivery. If the bull charged straight down the alley, his forward momentum could be redirected. Not stopped. Redirected. "When he moves, you run for the porch," Caleb said quietly. "Don't look back." The bull's charge came without warning. One explosive exhale, and then full acceleration, hooves hammering, packed earth as the distance collapsed. Caleb stepped forward deliberately at the last second, slamming the flat side of the shovel he still carried against the metal siding of the shed. The clang ricocheted through the narrow alley, amplifying inside the confined space. The bull adjusted trajectory by instinct toward the sound, head angling slightly left. That angle was enough. Caleb pivoted and sprinted toward the trailer ramp, diving sideways as the bull thundered past him. The animal's momentum carried him straight toward the open trailer bed. His forelegs hit the lowered ramp first, metal rattling violently under weight. For half a second he hesitated, hooves scrambling for traction. Then his full mass drove upward into the enclosed trailer interior. The hollow steel chamber amplified the impact into a deafening boom. Caleb lunged from the side and kicked the ramp upward with every ounce of strength left in his legs. Luke reached him in the same instant, helping force the heavy gate closed. The latch slammed into place just as the bull spun inside, crashing into the metal walls with explosive force. The trailer rocked violently side to side, tires lifting inches off dirt before slamming back down. Marissa reached the porch and flung the door open, turning back just in time to see Caleb and Luke sprinting the final yards. They dove inside as the trailer shook again, under another full-force impact from within. The house door slammed shut. Silence did not return immediately. The bull continued ramming the interior walls of the trailer, metal groaning and buckling under repeated blows. But confinement changes dominance. Space narrowed, momentum reduced. After several minutes, the impacts slowed, then stopped. Outside, the floodlights still bathed the yard in harsh, white glare. The barn corner lay partially collapsed. The fence sagged broken at the south pasture, and the trailer stood dented but upright, holding. Sheriff's deputies arrived 40 minutes later, alerted by neighbors who had heard the crashes echo across the fields. They approached cautiously, weapons ready but unnecessary. The bull stood inside the trailer breathing hard, sides heaving, no longer charging. Enclosed space had forced a boundary he could not break with forward momentum alone. By dawn, livestock control officers secured the trailer and transported the animal away from the property. Official reports would list him as a feral, unregistered bull exhibiting repeated aggressive behavior, including prior fatal goring on neighboring land. Accurate, incomplete. What the paperwork would not reflect was how methodically he had broken each barrier placed before him. Fence, barn wall, loft beam, exterior post. In open Texas pasture, dominance belongs to the heaviest body that can break the most obstacles. That night, the Turner family had not outrun strength. They had redirected it. As the sun rose over flattened grass and dented steel, Caleb stood on the porch steps, looking at the broken fence line in the distance. Repairs would come again. Stronger posts, tighter wire. But he understood something now that went beyond lumber and nails. When structure fails repeatedly, something learns. And what learns does not forget the path it once forced open